All right, Rich Ventura, Vice President of Strategy for NEC Display Solutions, and today's topic is around command and control and network operations centers. The panel today consists of members of different partners from all throughout the industry that are all industry leaders in this space. We have Randy Smith from Winstead. We have Randy Pagnan from RP Visual, Robert Cameron from Hyperwall, and Chris Feldman from NEC Display Solutions. So first I'm going to start by introducing Randy Pagnan. So Randy, tell us a little about RPV.
Thank you very much, Rich. Always a pleasure. I appreciate NEC doing these. RP Visuals, we do creative visual structures in this space in particular for all different disciplines, be it flat panels, projection-based, cubes, and an emerging trend of direct view LED. We do design, fabrication, and installation support for dealer integrators that play in this space. Myself personally, I've been playing in the control room space for about 25 years now, back when I was with a company called Electrohome. I like doing projection in this space. So appreciate this opportunity, and I thank you for putting this excellent panel together.
Perfect. So Randy Smith over at Winstead.
Hi guys, thanks Richard for inviting me on the panel. Winstead's been in business since 1963 making control room furniture. We're all about the operator and ergonomic benefits of having a correct console and workflow.
Perfect. All right, and Robert Cameron over at Hyperwall.
Yes, also thank you for having me on. Appreciate it very much. Hyperwall has been in business about 10 years. We have about 1,000 installations in 62 countries around the world. And we are a advanced visualization platform for video walls. So we take the content that customers need to source to the video walls or other display devices and allow them to manipulate that data to their liking.
Perfect. All right, and Christopher Feldman from NEC.
Hi, Rich. Thank you. So I'm just a small part of what is the Solutions Initiative from NEC Display. And my major role is to products and service and implement them as products into our price list and bring them to market.
All right, perfect. Thanks, Chris. So, Randy, let's kind of start with you. What have you seen changing in the control room market over the last 10 years, and where do you think it's heading?
Well, first of all, which Randy?
I'm sorry, Randy Pagnan. I know, I got two
There you
Randys.
go.
Randy Pagnan. Let's start with you.
You know, the basic premise of, what Randy Smith was saying, if it doesn't enhance the operator experience, then we've all failed, right? It's intended to remotely control an asset from a distance, from afar, whether you're monitoring bandwidth of a transportation corridor or a power utility or military resources. And the technology should be secondary to the experience. Who needs to read what where? The basic controllers themselves and Hyperwall will speak much more to this, is you have the ability to put anything anywhere now, dynamically reconfigurable display surface. The actual technology itself, we have seen recently as RP Visuals, we've seen a real progression to direct view LED narrow pixel pitch has started to be deployed fairly. We're a small company and we've done at least 12 control rooms now that are direct view LED. And so, the traditional control room a long time ago was projection based, then projection became cubes. Then you saw the emergence of flat panels. We did a big job with NEC at the LA EOC. And you had some other little technologies in there with like Christie microtiles and that now. But the two technologies I see being deployed still the most is cube technology and now the emergence of direct view LED. And also flat panels, LCDs.
So, Robert, what have you seen or change over with the control market over the years and where it's heading towards?
If I answer that, I'm kind of giving away how long I've been in the business, which ages me. So I'm going to be careful with that. But I have been in the control room business for about 15 years, but about 12 of that just been specifically for control rooms. And what I've seen honestly, as I remember the day, and so will probably you guys, is when there were fewer projects, they were bigger and more complex projects. Whereas today it seems like, well, there's still some big complex projects out there. There are a lot more projects that are a little bit smaller and less complex. So I think because technology is advanced, there's a lot more choices for customers. A lot more companies now can enjoy the benefits of having a control room.
Okay. So Randy Smith this time. So we'll go to the next Randy. Obviously your focus is coming from the furniture side, but what are you seeing that's really changed over the years in the control room market?
Thank you, Richard. Again, I don't want to date myself. I've been with Winstead 35 years. I think I just dated myself. So the days of rack mount and big bulky consoles and lots of monitors in wrong places are gone and replaced with LCDs. Again, the biggest trend we've seen recently is sit-to-stand consoles. It's been proven years ago that sitting all day is a bad, is not efficient, and standing all day is not efficient. So as time goes on, we're seeing more and more people go to sit-to-stand consoles.
Okay. All right, Christopher. So, with NEC, we've got a pretty wide spectrum of products. What have we seen with our display products over the years, how they've changed for the control rooms?
Well, fortunately with NEC displays, we've been adapting with that environment as well. Constantly having new innovations, both from the desktop area to the large format, where we have the ultra narrow displays, which keep getting smaller and smaller, so that the million between the screens is getting minuscule or non-existent. We have the direct view LEDs now. We also have laser projection, which we're bringing projection back into the space, allowing for a lot more flexibility in the use of space as it is. A lot of these new systems going in, as was mentioned earlier, smaller ones are going in, and so they have more limitations in regards to what they can do as far as display technology. So now you can incorporate other aspects to it. So you can fly in a direct view LED, you can use a laser projection, you can use a short throw laser projection type device, or you can use a standard video walls.
Okay. So Randy Smith, so you've got obviously been working in this industry for a few years. What have you seen, if we're talking about market trends themselves, and we're talking about the different markets, and I'm sure, at the beginning we looked at it was a lot of government agencies doing control rooms and command centers. Today, what are we seeing? What kind of command rooms or control centers are we seeing going in today?
Well, we're still seeing a lot of military, a lot of government. That's consistent. There seems to be an effect recently with the new administration. There's a little bit more of that. But more and more you need a control room for security, which could be a parking ramp, could be a casino, could be a mall, anything. We just finished As Is this week, excuse me, which is a security show. And there was a number of vertical markets that showed up at our stand. I'm used to talking British talk, sorry. Spend too much time in England. But more and more, as I think Robert said earlier, there's more and more small NOC centers that we're dealing with as much as we are with the big ones.
Okay. So Robert, with Hyperwall, what your take, like maybe your top, 3 to 5 areas that you're seeing the growth from command rooms types of application, not so much application, maybe markets themselves. Where do you see in those being?
Well, to answer that, I would want to address the applications because I think they work hand in hand. And here's why, because what we're seeing at Hyperwall is, yes, there are traffic management centers and power utility control rooms and other types of advanced control room opportunities, but the two markets that we see not only really ramping up now, but have future growth, is security operations centers and network operations. And physical security meaning physical security, and network obviously meaning IP and enterprise networks. So underneath those two applications, we see that there is higher ed. So the larger universities are very concerned about security and certainly continuity of their business from a network perspective. And then underneath that would be corporate, and corporate could be Global 2000 or your Fortune 1000 companies, because those companies have broad real estate investments all over the world, and they have human assets all over the world. So they're trying to secure all of that. The other would be in the utility space, be it a power utility, water or gas, security and network operations is very big for those guys, even setting aside the fact of the control room for the distribution or transmission centers. And then the last would be, I think, public safety, which is huge for everybody, law enforcement, 911, emergency management, etc.
Perfect. So Randy, I mean, you look at different command centers and projects you guys have been involved in. Where do you see that the biggest growth? What markets are you seeing the biggest growth in?
Randy,
Pagnan, I'm sorry. Yeah, Pagnan.
From our perspective, the market that seems to have a lot of funding right now, and it is more on the mega side control rooms. And I do agree with both Robert and Randy that there is a lot more deployment going on in the smaller two-man type network operation control center. But the utility space, Southern California Edison, PG&E, Exelon have all done very large traditional map board type applications. So I think that you're seeing larger numbers because the technology, the sweet spot seems to be about 1.2 millimeter to 1.5 millimeter direct view LED, and that stuff's going to be costing you $5,000 to $7,000 a square foot. So these walls are typically 10 feet by 60 feet wide and 8 to 12 operators, which Randy likes quite a bit for operator councils. So we're seeing a lot in the utility space. But we're also seeing the smaller regional NOCs. But in the same, for example, Southern California Edison, about 2 years ago, we did 23 control rooms with them. 2 were mega rooms, 2 were big, large network operation control centers for transmission. But there's 21 distribution centers. And those 21 distribution centers, some of them only had a large overview of 4 55-inch panels. So.
Okay. So Chris, you look at what we've done so far in command and control and network operations centers over the year. What markets are we seeing a lot of the growth at NEC?
The 2 largest ones we probably see is probably in corporate and financial. Financial being the largest one overall. There's a number of customers that can't mention necessarily by name right now, but they are using that smaller room, like a 6 by 12. A 2 by 6, I should say, for a 12-screen video wall array in that control room environment. And then they will have multiple control rooms across the United States. So instead of having, a very large, complicated room that they have, they're breaking up into multiple rooms that are smaller. And, that's being used by a number of financial institutions. So, I think traditionally when we think about this market, it's more, police, fire, that type of thing. But there's a lot of corporate business that benefits from it and that can use it. The smart grid, so to speak. Right. So there's been a couple projects we've done with the smart grid where you have these smaller rooms, 4, 5, 6 screens with 4, 5, or 6 operators with a couple controllers, all working together in small rooms, and then they're spread across the geographic area that they are responsible for. So these rooms are becoming more commonplace and more flexible as the technology is improving.
Okay. All right.
When you say flexible, how do you mean that? Just that they're just.
So traditionally, when you looked at when you say a control center, right? Everyone thinks NASA, right? So you think about that type of environment. You have a bunch of screens and a bunch of guys arranged in a classroom type formation, and that's going away. What we have now is smaller rooms, like what I mentioned, like the smart grid, so to speak. One project that we did in Chicago, we only had a couple operators that were in Chicago, but they had 4 or 5 offices around the area that they service that all had a similar array. And what they had was one large 65-inch panel and the 46-inch displays on either side. So that was the room that they used, and it was a much smaller type environment, and it was more collaborative. So instead of having a classroom style sit down, they all were angled toward each other, not necessarily facing each other, but angled toward each other, so they could see the screens that they're working with, and also talk to and collaborate with one another. The rigidness that was control rooms before is changing into almost a more collaborative environment.
Christopher, we're finding the same thing with collaboration, where people want to talk to one another, especially during an event.
Right.
Yeah, and I think if I could add to that is that one of the things we're seeing on the visualization side is that users are wanting to have remote access to all of the information that they may be seeing on the video walls. So the need for everybody to go to the command center, if you will, or the control room is not quite as important today as it was 10 or 15 years ago. It's still important, but with the access of remote and applications that people can use their smartphones for or tablets, to gain insight into what that common operating picture is that is being seen in that control room. So I think that's another driving factor here.
I'd like to know more about that. If anybody in the group wants to talk about that.
I didn't hear you. What?
I said I'd like to know more about that as far as remote access. It's been a lot of conversations at the Winstead group about, will control rooms go away? And our feelings are with remote access, that's just giving the people who need to know, the managers and such, upper management, alerts that something's going on in their control room and they need to be in touch.
Yeah, I don't think control rooms will go away, but they are going to change as they have. That's just me. I do think that, again, going back to what we're talking about here, is that control rooms are becoming smaller, and there are more of them because technology is more available and it's becoming more affordable. But I don't think they're going to go away. I think you're just going to see a lot more of them, but smaller. And again, Randy, you were saying this a minute ago, there are still some very large projects out there. I'm not saying that there aren't large projects. There are some very large projects out there. But it's like any technology, right?
On the remote collaboration, Randy, my view is kind of that of, everybody's always for years talked about trade show like Infocom going away, and yet we still want to get together face to face and press flesh. Yet I can watch every product that was cool at NEC's booth remotely on a host of different things. I still think that there's going to be a plethora of more smaller remote collaboration control room spaces, but they're still going to feed the mother overview. And let's face it, and it's terrible to say, but a lot of these major NOCs, they are done from a marketing perspective. They are intended to improve the performance of the operator, but man, when AT&T loses their Eastern Seaboard, they always speak in front of the big video wall, and they always say we're on top of it. So I think part of it is obviously operator efficiency, I think, has increased significantly, but I think there's still a marketing piece of the large network operation control center. I'm just interested to see about the remote collaboration capabilities. Can we interact remotely, or do we have to be face-to-face in a crisis situation?
Yeah. I think with the remote capabilities, what I've seen personally is more so where they're trying to enable the operators to do more. And then as you move up levels, they have less of the smaller things to do, and they handle larger picture things. And then when it becomes large enough that it needs to escalate to them, that's when the remote view comes into play. Perfect example, with Hyperwall, we've done several applications where we have one of the displays is set up into a particular room that's all high-level people that don't normally deal with the day-to-day operation of that. But if something were to happen significantly in that room, they can then instantly transmit it from that room up to another part of the building very easily, essentially a push of a button. So I think when we talk remote, that's the first thing that I think about.
A couple questions for perhaps NEC, just for my own curiosity. Have you been selling any interactive touch into a process control environment where operators are actually interacting with your monitor? That was question one to NEC. Second question: are you seeing laser projection being redeployed into overview applications? We are, by the way. We've actually done 2 or 3 control centers lately with laser projection for overview, 1x3s on an ambient light rejecting supernova screen type up in Seattle, up in San Francisco. So I'm just asking if you guys are seeing this. Are you seeing some resurrection of projection in control room?
Well, to start with your first question in regards to touch, yeah, we do. We do sell a lot of touch into these types of environments. Probably the majority of it is on the desktop level, where the operator's manipulating the software that they're using just by tapping the screen. There is some large format that is incorporated with that, especially now that, with our new PMV series where you can lay them flat or have them inverted, that type of thing. So essentially you can build them into a table. And with the laser, we've had a large push on that to get those back into those spaces. I think with laser, it is a bit of an uphill battle just to get that product out there. But the more customers that we can get these products into their hands and they can see how well it works and they can see what a benefit it will be to them, then it makes it a much easier decision for them to incorporate that into their systems.
Okay. Thanks.
And, you know, and I know, Robert, you guys have been looking at a lot of the stuff with collaboration and touch interactive systems. You want to talk a little bit about what you guys have seen so far?
Yeah. Actually, it's a nice segue from the last conversation, and that's that from a touch perspective, it's hard to envision somebody walking up to a large video wall in a control room and touching the screen to do things. It's not a very effective use of that tool. However, from an interaction collaborative standpoint, we're seeing when that interaction and touch capability can be incorporated at the user's desk, at the supervisor's desk, or at a conference room table, call it the bridge inside of a control room, when you can actually interact with that technology there and it be viewed on the video wall. That's how we see collaboration and touch type devices being utilized in the control room. And then second to that is collaboration in all the ancillary rooms around the main theater of operation. And so, you know, in most of these control rooms, there are crisis briefing centers, there is a director's office, there are all sorts of training rooms and other conference rooms that need to have at certain times access to the information that's on the video wall, and vice versa. Maybe there's information that's being sent to or utilized in a crisis briefing center that needs to be pushed to the video wall. So from that perspective, we're working with other manufacturers and partners in the industry to create these hooks, if you will, that allow that collaboration with our software and our software with theirs. So collaboration is becoming a very big part of control room environments.
Robert, to that point, we're making more and more collaboration tables that end up in the center of the control room.
Yeah, I imagine. Yeah, absolutely.
And then, you know, in turn, we're doing conference room tables and everything else so everything matches.
Yep.
Are
Yeah,
they,
you know,
just for interest, Randy, are they progressing over to being digital? Like, are they digital plot type tables replacing traditional paper mat tables?
Yes, more and more of that. And then we got to be aware of touchscreens in respect to people like to put monitors on articulating arms. And as you're touching a monitor with an articulating arm, it wants to push back. So we have to use our articulating arms with the clamp system. Might sound pretty basic, but it's a question we got to ask while we're designing the room.
Cool. Well, you know, I think we hit on two really big topics, which have been about remote access and collaboration. But we're also seeing this really big impact for new data points like drones and mobile devices. You know, Randy Smith, what have you seen with some of the network operations centers you guys engage with, where they're taking all these new data points that we didn't have a few years ago?
Well, I can tell you we've done a number of drone rooms in Nevada and other places. We've done some drone rooms overseas in the Middle East and all that. For the most part, we can't talk about them, but there's more and more and more. We're also doing quite a few missile command rooms as of late.
Okay, really?
I answered your question directly, but you know, so many of these things we can't talk about. We're currently working on a room that potentially has 160 operators. It's an EOC, but it's only going to have 6 people in it until there's a crisis. And imagine the rest of you have seen the same thing.
Mm-hmm. That's actually, by the way, an interesting comment you just made, Randy. With network operation control centers 24/7, round the clock, multi-discipline, but we're also seeing lately some more activity in the EOC space, where the control room is pushed out the back of a plane or deployed for a hurricane type thing. They get turned on, they get turned off. Just from, again, you guys play in the space, Randy Smith. Are you seeing more EOC activity or more NOC?
EOC activity currently, especially for this year.
Yeah.
Well, Robert, I mean, what are you seeing? Because obviously, coming from the fact that you're the point where we're bringing in the content through all the different data points. When we talk about things like drones and body cameras, now we're hearing on police departments and things like that. What are you seeing that are becoming more and more of the requirements or the demands in these network operation centers when it comes to content and feeds?
Well, so I would think of it in verticals. So if you take public safety and law enforcement, you're right. Body cams, the broader use of drones in public safety and law enforcement is growing rapidly. And while we may not have had really any that I can think of applications where they've been specific to drones or monitoring body cams, I can see that coming. I think that is certainly going to be embedded into a video wall in an operations center, or maybe even be a standalone, smaller two-person room operations center. But it's definitely there. It's coming, and then you go to security, and with facial recognition software and all of the different types of technologies that are being created today for security, all of that stuff is being ingested in, and it's just sort of like the sky's the limit as it comes to what's next, right? Everything is possible, but it's definitely, those are actually just sources coming into the video wall, by the way. Those require nothing that special to do. It's just another source that would come in that allows a hyperwall solution to be able to provide the operator the capability to put that content anywhere they want to put it, on the video wall or in a crisis briefing center, et cetera.
Okay. So Chris, just kind of take a little bit different direction. Let's talk a little bit about the importance of picking the right display technology. We hear people say, well, I can just go to Best Buy and buy a TV, or I got this. What are recommendations that you're saying when it comes to the display technologies?
Well, as we mentioned earlier, and was brought up, we were talking about, police officer body cams and that type of thing. There is a big change in these types of centers with a focus on video. Even if you look at, camera technology recently, where the feeds were more of a kind of a stuttered feed, right? So it was giving, just several frames, talking 7-8 frames a second. But now you're getting much higher resolution, much higher definition, and streaming in real time. So you have much higher quality video coming in and being displayed onto the screen in a variety of environments: low level light, high level light, indoor, outdoor, those types of things. And you have a number of different cameras with color capabilities all combined together. So with the display technology, you want to make sure that you have the kind of technology that one can stand up to that, right? So if you have a number of feeds being displayed onto a wall at once, and they rotate through, and a number of these stand still, if you're dealing with like a residential type panel, you're going to have burn-in, right? When you have a commercial designed application, or I should say commercial design display, when it switches, it's going to refresh, and you're not going to have that burn-in. You won't have a ghost image laid over on top of what you're trying to already view, to make it easier for you to take advantage of that higher level stream that you're actually seeing. Just the flexibility overall with the displays themselves. The NEC style of modular display that's been created is really designed to grow with your application or with your room. As technologies change or applications change, we have a number of different components that we can work with. So we can accept all major digital inputs. So we take DisplayPort, we take DVI, we take HDMI. We have the Intel OPS slot, so we can actually install computers or HDSDI cards or those types of things built into the display. And also referring to the OPS, it allows us to be more flexible. By if there is a change that we haven't foreseen, we can build something to fit into that slot to then work with that new technology. So while the NEC technology is reliable and proven and is used the world over, the big thing that we want to get out there is that the NEC displays are going to grow with your environment. The technology just changes so quickly that, and these rooms are not inexpensive, right? I mean, they represent a significant investment for either the municipality or whomever is putting these in. So they want to make sure that they're actually getting a lot of value for what they're purchasing. And that's where the NEC comes in, right? So we can adapt, we can change, and we can move with that environment. So if it does change to a new type of content generating technology, we can adapt to that and move along with it.
Chris, could you elaborate on that?
Which part?
Very
So,
good.
so Randy Smith, you know, what is the difference between having furniture that's designed for the space and just going down and buying a desk? I mean, some people say, well, can't they just put a desk in this space? There's obviously a difference and a reason why you buy products that are designed for the command space.
Richard, good question. We get that question frequently, where people think they can go to their office supply dealer and get a desk, even a sit-stand desk, or go down to Best Buy and get a low-cost desk that they put in their home. But we're working 24/7, 365, just like the rest of the people on the panel. So you need durability and flexibility with your console, with your piece of furniture. You need professional wire management. It's not just a grommet drilled in the tabletop. It's real wire management that's going to work in the building. Again, it's the flexibility of adding and moving monitors. You know, we put a track in the back of virtually everything we make so that you can slide your poles back and forth. There's a dramatic difference. We found out people that are putting in office supply desks are calling us in a few years and saying, this didn't work.
Okay. So Randy, I hate to say this, but isn't a mount a mount?
There's more than a mount, actually. The biggest single thing with mounting NEC display technology, you got a great panel here. There's 4 things that are going to make a video wall look good, and Randy Smith plays in whether you can read it or not, and he downplays when people don't put thought into the console, you can't read it. 4 things make it look good. It's the technical display technology, and Chris, NEC has laser projection, you have flat panels, LCD, and you pick that technology. Pixels everywhere. The trend in control rooms now is to be able to put pixels anywhere, and that's Robert's bit. That's Robert. That's what he adds to the part. He can take pixels from here and he can put them there. And then the actual visual display is a marriage, and the marriage is color and uniformity, and that's partner with NEC there. And it's the physical mechanical seam alignment. And between your panels, when you guys did 10,000 panels into Microsoft, your seam used to be 3.5 millimeters. I always like visual props, as you know. Look at that, 3.5 millimeters, okay? And your new 1.2 millimeter LED, that's the physical seam that you have to deliver. And when you're delivering an aperture that is, 2 times thicker than a human hair, the mount starts to really become apparent. If you have a bad seam, that's going to stick out. It might even actually result in losing information that's critical between the monitors. So more than any other application, mounts in a control room are really imperative, but they have to be done in concert with the console manufacturer. More often than not, when we're asked to consult and design, we're usually working with a Winstead. It's a marriage. So you got to make sure that you can deliver the specification that NEC says, which now your narrow bezel, that's not an easy thing to align. It is for a 2x2, a 3x3, but it's not so easy for a 4x4 or a 3x15 that's more atypical in the larger control centers.
Randy or Chris, do you have to worry about with the thin bezel the tilting the monitors?
Typically, when you say tilt, are you talking about tilting the top row down towards?
Exactly.
From a mount standpoint, that becomes challenging on how you're going to have it come in and out because gravity comes into play. But you do raise a very good point. We're seeing some strange applications where panels are orientated up or down. That's an NEC question. So, Chris, take it away.
Yeah, we've seen that as well. I refer to it as the panorama style view, where the, as we mentioned before, that we're talking smaller rooms, so the only way you have to go is up, right? So what they're doing is they're actually starting to wrap the walls, or you're actually going up and above the audience to fill more of their field of view. And that gets complicated. There's more than just mount selections involved with that, because if you think if you tilt a screen forward, how are you going to do that and still have the bottom of the screen itself to align? So there's a bit of a marriage between people like Randy here, and then we have to have, conversations with contractors that are building the wall to make sure that when everything's done and everything's aligned, one, it's serviceable, right? Because that's going to be key, because we build them to last, but you never know what happens, right? So we want to make sure that that's first of all possible, and second, we want to make sure that the screens are going to be installed in a way that isn't going to damage them, right? Because a lot of times there's a tendency to kind of shoehorn things into an idea that people have had, and so by working together, as partners, we can get more complicated arrangements like these done. So you can see some cool things that are done. Fox News had a very cool array that actually wrapped around the back of the studio area. So that was complicated because you have a lot of compound angles, those types of things. So yeah, I mean, there's kind of a marriage now to kind of get these new style rooms put together. The postage stamp style, as I refer to it, video wall control center, is starting to fade away, right? So they're moving into these different sizes.
So Robert, tell me a bit about why they need to buy a device or a system from software perspective or hardware perspective that's designed for this, instead of just putting in a computer with multiple video cards on it.
Well, putting in a computer with multiple video cards isn't going to really give them the dynamic capabilities. And dynamic, I mean the ability to resize and move things around the screen, to have the agility, if you will, of applications on the video wall, which is real important for that operator when they need to use this information during a crisis, for example. I think when you're talking about computers and multiple video cards, we're talking extreme basics in terms of a system and limited functionality. But for example, with Hyperwall, it's a software application. We don't have proprietary hardware. We are just all software and software licenses. So we do, again, provide a lot of agility and flexibility for a customer to use whatever kind of PCs they want with that video wall.
Okay. So Robert, tell me a bit more about, why would somebody look at a software-based solution versus buying, there are hardware-based platforms out there, right?
Sure.
And so there's obviously reasons why you want to look at software and with redundancy and things like that. And tell a bit more about just why Hyperwall chose to go down the software route.
Well, that's a great question, actually. I think it's, there are a lot of things. Let me keep it to the basics, though. The basics would be that it's more cost effective, it's more agile, it's easier to use, easier to install, and easier to maintain. And I think what I've seen and heard from customers in the past, as well as a lot of integrators in the market, is that dealing with some of the competitive products out there, you'd think that they'd be a lot easier to work with over the years and they've been able to refine things, but they seem to be making things more complex. And that's what we don't want, because our users and the people we talk to typically want something that is trouble-free. They don't want to have to think too hard about what it is they're buying, as long as it will do what they need it to do. So simplicity of understanding it, operating it, installing it, and maintaining it, again, I think is at the core of why they would select a software solution like ours. Also, with a software solution, for example, our competitors, if you want fault tolerance or redundancy, you have to buy a second box, a second system. So that adds to the cost. Whereas with our software, redundancy is built into the software at no additional cost. So there are a lot of things we can do with software that can't be done with a hardware solution.
Okay. So Randy Smith, I got it right this time. What do you think keeps those that work in mission critical operation centers, control rooms up at night?
What do I think keeps them up at night?
Yeah. I mean, are there problems or things that they got to worry about that keeps them up at night that you guys can help mitigate?
Well, for one thing, people getting tired, groggy, not paying attention, and all the rest of it. So that plays right into why sit-stand is becoming more and more popular. I mean, you have the same problem we have, on the third shift, you just had your lunch break, and you're starting to doze off a bit. So again, the military proved years ago that you're not falling asleep standing up. So that is the trend, 100%. Randy's smiling like he's seen it.
Just a lot of the control rooms I've been in, I'll tell you honestly, a lot of times when there's not a crisis happening, they let them watch the basketball game or the hockey game. So I remember once touring a control room up in Canada, and I was telling this delegation from Taiwan, this room's really critical. It's really important. It's mission critical. It's controlling all the shipping through the St. Lawrence Seaway. We walked in there and the hockey game was on.
Or CNN, or
because there was no ship going through the canals at the time, so that might keep them up.
You're saying that's what keeps them up at night, or the hockey games?
Keep them up at night.
yeah, more so than standing.
Right. I don't know if I could interject real quick. I think, if we're sort of looking at the serious approach, this is that it's business continuity, right? So the people that are in charge of making sure that they can mitigate the risk to a business, that's what keeps these guys up at night. Do I have access to the right information when I need it? Is it, going to be there if I have a crisis? So, it's business continuity, and the fear of not having that is, I think, what keeps them. So they need reliability, right? They need dependability. They need people that support the infrastructure that they have in their control room to be able to be there when they need them if there is an event.
So, Randy Pagnan, probably one of the most important questions that people ask us about is, how's your solution going to help us mitigate financial or physical security risks? So if we go back to the idea of the mount and everything, what things are designed in your product that are going to help companies mitigate those risks?
Minimize the outage. Chris talked about before, every products are so much more reliable than back when network operation control centers were starting to use digital, but they still fail. There's still going to be a situation where you're going to lose it and lose a panel, lose a portion, lose a piece. How quickly can you replace that? How seamlessly can you do it? And at what minimal cost? You change one 55-inch NEC panel out, and let's just say hypothetically you break the 3 around it. Well, that sounds bad, but if you change out one NEC direct view LED and you break 3 or 4 around it, that cost just went up exponential. So, all of us, all partners on the phone here, all 4, have a shared value in making sure that it's on, it's 24/7, it's minimal downtime, and you get the return on investment. The return on investment, though, is tied to, more so from a SCADA supervisor control data acquisition married with Hyperwall and allowing them to do their jobs better. Getting them the information where they need the information, when they need the information. Ourself, Winstead, NEC, we got to keep the displays lit. We got to keep the view in line. We got to be able to see it when you need to see it.
They can consider sight lines.
Sight lines.
All the rest
Again, number one screw up I see, Randy, quite a bit when they don't employ as someone like your firm is you just can't see what you need to see. It sounds simple, but it's quite often screwed up.
Well, for years, we've been putting 10 pounds of in a 5-pound bag, so we try to prevent that as best we can.
Yeah.
Okay. So, Chris, are there any software tools, outside of the Operations Center software? There's software tools or different types of tools that NEC looks at for these video wall systems that can help customers?
Yeah, there's 2 right off the top. First would be our color calibration software. As we were just talking about with, getting these things serviced, right? Nothing sticks out greater than when you have one screen in an array that looks completely different than the others. If we have these screens out there 3 or 4 years, and you have a failure for whatever reason, say someone vacuuming at night puts a broom handle through one of them, that type of thing. New display, it's not going to match the other displays. So with our display wall calibrator software and a minimal amount of training, the in-house technical staff responsible for that wall can easily calibrate that display or calibrate all the displays together. So what it does is it takes what was a very complicated and lengthy process, and it incorporates a lot of automation into that that allows you to essentially get that wall looking to how it should be and keeping it consistent. Especially depending on the lighting that you have in the room, you can actually change the color temperatures of the display eyes, right? When we're talking about fatigue and longevity for the people that are working in that environment, that's a consideration that needs to be made now, right? So, in combination with, Randy's furniture, right? So like the stress that's on the viewer's eyes can also be considered using that type of software. And then you can record and a profile, so to speak. So when you have what works in that environment, you can just rinse and repeat for wherever else you're going to do that. And another one is our Never Set Administrator software. It's software that we have that's actually free to use, and it's an incredibly powerful tool. And what it allows you to do is it allows you to take every single one of your NEC displays when they're on the same network. It allows you to actually control them and monitor them. We talked about, the fact that, things have to work. We talked about redundancy a little bit. So what you can actually do is you can set up macros within that software so that an email will be sent to an administrator if there's a failure, right? If a screen were to go down, or let's say someone wanted to watch the game and they tried to change the channel, right? They didn't realize it wasn't a TV. And all of a sudden it's on the wrong input. And now you have that chunk of information is now missing. That can actually be relayed to one of the administrators, and they can come in and correct that. And the beautiful thing about it is they can do it right from their desk, since they're all networked together. Wherever they're connected, they actually have a stack or a list of all the displays that are available, which also includes desktop displays, as well as the laser projection we were talking about before. And you can actually control them. You can turn them on, you can turn them off, you can set up macros to, depending on the time of day, you can have the screens dim themselves. You can do pretty much whatever is programmable within that display. You can set up within the Never Set Administrator as a macro and change that functionality. There are newsrooms that utilize the software, and depending on the type of news that they're watching at that time, they'll actually change the configuration of the wall. So it'll either be one large wall, a bunch of individual screens, or a smaller wall with individual screens. And it's literally all done with a push of a button from an administrator's desk. So it's a very powerful tool that's available for customers to use with NEC displays.
Okay, cool. All right, so we're wrapping this down. So Randy Smith, if you're looking at designing a brand new room or remodeling a room, what's like the #1 advice you'd give somebody?
Work with all of the partners on this panel, so that, in all sincerity,
So Randy,
there's no one manufacturer who's going to make that room right. It's all collaboration. You gotta understand what the environment's going to be, what the workflow is, what are the lighting conditions, what are the acoustics. You gotta work. What's the hyperwall going to look like? What's the function of the hyperwall? What's, what type of NEC monitors are going in? How is Randy treating, working with the monitors and so on, or screens or whatever the case is. So it's a collaboration.
Okay, cool. Robert, how about you?
I would echo that. I'd say the same thing. Randy's onto something there. I think I'd define it as there's an industry term called 4 walls in. And that means that immediate room, the operations center, is an ecosystem. And to Randy's point, you've got lighting and human factor issues, ergonomics, you have consoles, you have the video wall, you have a lot of different moving pieces there that all need to be well coordinated together to make sure that room's well designed. And you don't know how many projects I've been in where an architect, and I don't mean to pick on architects, but an architect or a facilities guy or somebody has not accounted for the fact that, hey, I might not be able to see the bottom of the screens. If I put a 3x5 wall in a 9-foot ceiling room and I have my desktop monitors at 50 inches off the floor, they don't think about sight lines and things. So I agree. Randy's on something that I think that you have to look at that room as an ecosystem.
Okay. So, Mr. Pagnan, what would be that big advice you'd give?
I would actually just supplement what both Robert and Randy said with something actually Winstead usually states quite a bit is you got to get buy-in from the operator. The operator typically has the technology forced upon them. It's the higher ups that are going to come in with this technology. And so very important early on, get the operator to buy in, get them to engage. Second of all, as much as possible, look at other sites. There's sites that are publicly available, not Randy's that he's talking about, but there's other ones you can go see. LA EOC has a 4x7 NEC wall. You can get into that space. Go see at it, see how they use it, ask their input, ask what they could do better, what they did bad, what could they improve upon, and then prototype. If you can afford it, the biggest single thing, and it's a collaboration and it's all of our fault or it's all of our credit, you have to read what you need to read where. So if you can't read it It doesn't matter how much money you spend on it. If the guy sitting 22 feet away can't launch missiles, then we all failed. So prototype it. And again, reach out to experts that you have here on the panel and learn.
Mr. Feldman, what advice would you give?
Yeah, probably one of the biggest shortcomings I see when these things actually start to go in is lack of planning. You know, as was just mentioned, you know, prototyping. You know, nothing's more frustrating than, you know, all the power is run and installed and the duplexes are out and you go to plug everything in and you have plenty for the screens, but then they forget about the PCs. Make sure that, you know, we're using OPSs, but, you know, a lot of times they'll use externals. So, you know, everything has an amperage, everything has an overhead. You're going to make sure that all that is accounted for, you know, as well as weight. You know, we talk about new technologies like direct VLAD. Going to make sure that, you know, all these places you're dealing with, you know, metal studs. So, you know, that's not going to go on the wall really easy. So you got to make sure that all that's accounted for.
Okay. All right. So, you know, closing, you know, Robert, is there anything else you want to make sure we bring up, and then also kind of let people know how they can get a hold of you and Hyperwall?
Yeah, actually, I think this has been very helpful, and I'm glad that we could participate. I really appreciate it. They can get in touch with me at my email address, which is first initial R and last name Cameron at hyperwall.com. So absolutely reach out to me, or they can access us through the relationship we have with you, Rich at NEC. We have a very strong relationship with your organization. So there are two ways that they can reach out to us.
All right, perfect. Mr. Pagnan.
Visit our website, www.rpvisuals.com. My email address is Randy, R-A-N-D-Y, at rpvisuals.com. Encourage you, again, put us on the tour for learning. Our facility, we've got in our facility, even though we're a mount company, direct VLAD, laser projection. We have a 2x2 collaboration touch wall from NEC, a host of different technologies. We don't sell electronics, we sell mounts, but we want to be more than a mount, so please stop by and learn what we're all about. Thank you very much, NEC, as always.
Perfect. And Randy Smith.
You can reach me at randys@winstead.com. No A in Winstead. Or you can winstead.com or our 800 number, 1-800-447-2257. Richard, I want to thank you for inviting us and being part of the panel. I think it was really worthwhile.
Perfect. Excellent. All right, Mr. Feldman.
Probably the best resources you're going to have is NECdisplay.com. A lot of the partners that we have that we work with are listed on there, as well as the displays that we talked about, such as laser projection, direct VLAD, and large format and desktop. All those are listed, and then there's contact information on the site itself to get you directed in a most expedient fashion to who would help you the fastest. So thank you very much for having me on.
Well, this is Rich Ventura, once again, Vice President of Strategy for NEC, and I want to thank our panel members from RPV, Winstead, Hyperwall, and NEC for a great panel. And any more information you need, definitely come to NECdisplay.com, and we can get in touch with our partners as well. Thank you.